On a bleak December day, a remote signal box on the former Great Central Main Line flickers back to life. Funded by the LNER GC Heritage Trust and the Friends of the Great Central Main Line via your donations, volunteers are transforming the fortunes of this outpost abandoned by British Rail. Project leader Chris Stone is our guide for this tour, but only once the all-important and newly installed stove is stoked up against the cold.
Hotchley Hill is a signal box about halfway between Ruddington to the north and Loughborough to the south. It was built by the London North Eastern Railway around 1947 as part of the expansion of the gypsum works opposite, and it's now been restored by volunteers for use on the Great Central Railway. It has been derelict for a very long time. We believe it was last used in the early 80s. So what we're really trying to do is reverse about 40 years of neglect and bring it back into an operational use. We had a shell. We had the brick walls, we had the concrete roof, which leaked. We didn't really have anything else. All the doors were broken or just missing, all the windows were smashed, and there was no interior. We've rebuilt the floor entirely with volunteer effort, funded by donations from supporters, and now we're beginning to look at the rest of the interior. Recently, we've had contractors in, again supported by the LNER Great Central Trust, and they've rebuilt a lot of the window sills and the canopy which surrounds the windows. Those were badly spalled due to rust, which was basically due to leaks in the roof, and those have already been repaired by refelting the roof. The window frames are brittle, and we've had to do some restoration work on those to make them fit for use again. One of the first things we worked on here was actually repairing the doors. These are original doors, although they are in a very different condition from how we found them. These are the original Frittle doors, which means they are steel, but when we found them, they were in fact bent in two, and they're something we want to preserve because they are very good quality. One of the unusual features of this building is we do have this terrace area to the north. To be honest, we're not quite sure why it's here, but it is unique, not just to signal boxes in preservation, but to every other signal box of this type. For some reason, the LNR built every one different, and that provides space underneath us for the relay room, which perhaps explains things. Through here, it's one of the least glamorous parts of the building. This would have been the outside toilet, and I think that really emphasises how the building is not just modern, but also very old-fashioned. It does have an outside loo, and as far as we know, this was never plumbed into sewers.
As always with signal box restoration, a huge amount of work happens completely out of sight.
This is the locking room, which refers to the interlocking system which would be installed here. An interlocking is essentially a computer which supervises the signaller upstairs and makes sure that every movement is a safe movement with no risk of collisions of trains. In this case, we are in a very much transitional installation, so that interlocking would have been partly electrical and partly mechanical. The mechanical part of that system would have been installed on the iron lever frame over here, and the electrical part would be in the relay room. So this here is a 1888 pattern Saxby & Farmer lever frame, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a frame and it holds levers. This predates the building by at least 50 years, which is interesting because we don't know where it came from, although only part of this is actually original. The upper half of this was donated to the project very generously, and amazingly was a perfect fit. We were able to drop it in with only a few bolts. This here is the bottom of the levers that everyone sees above, and if I call out, ready, you can see it moves with quite a lot of energy. One of the flaws with this installation originally was that these beams here twist. They look very strong, but there is a lot of weight on them, and in fact this base is probably impossible to remove without demolishing the building. When we installed the frame, we realised that the whole thing shook, and so as well as being supported by the new floor above, we've also installed tie bars to the back wall which stabilise it and hopefully improve the lifetime of the beam, which won't be under so much stress. One of this year's projects has been to start doing the electrical fit-out for the signal box. We've installed a lot of modern conduit, which is almost indistinguishable from the 3/4 inch conduit which was used originally. The fittings are modern, and the wiring inside is absolutely up to modern specifications. Unfortunately, we are forced to run off generators and batteries for the moment, which is going into our distribution board. And one of our big fundraising targets for the next year is a cable to bring power to the signal box, which will enable a lot of other work. You can see that the conduit has T's coming off it, facing upwards, which will line up with our plan for the upstairs work.
As the work continues, more of the story of the box is revealed.
It's a bit like a pillbox, which were built for defending the country during the war. And in fact, we have this very small slit window in the locking room. As far as we know, this is built for air raid protection. Although the building is actually post-war, it was built with the possibility of another war in mind, and so it is very strong and would probably withstand shrapnel hitting the gypsum works opposite. One of the things people always notice when they walk into this locking room is the numbers on the beam there and the ones, which are stenciled backwards. That is a recreation of the original numbering as painted by the LNER, and we assume it was a mistake by whoever did it, but we have recreated that as a nod to the original installers. One of the summer projects, which was funded by the Trust, has been the restoration of this door. This is in fact the original relay room door, built 75 years ago, and has been professionally restored to fully working condition. This is, if you like, the brain of the signal box. This room does look very simple at the moment, white walls, it's quite small, but this will become a hive of activity. The walls will be covered in wiring and equipment, and in fact, some of it will have to go into the room next door because it isn't quite big enough for modern installations.
The track layout here looks straightforward, but almost every lever in the box will be needed when it reopens under current plans. Hotchley Hill will be a place not only where trains can pass each other, but also terminate, with the loco moving from one end of the train to the other. There's also a through siding for shunting.
We are halfway between Loughborough and Ruddington, which is a single track line presently. So if we ever want to run two trains, this is where they'll pass, and this building is where we'll control that passing in a safe manner. We would really like to be running trains all the way from Leicester to Ruddington, and they'll come past here. So this box will interface with Ruddington to the north, but in the future it will also interface with Loughborough to the south, which will be really exciting as a preservation project. The thing that's really exciting about this building and this signalling installation as it was, is that it's part of a transition. What we have here represents the vision of the future that the LNER had just after World War II. You can tell that the building has very modern appeal from the outside. It's a flat roof and eaves. It also has large picture windows. Although we are looking towards the future, when we look at the architecture of this building, we do still have a mechanical lever frame. Most signal boxes have the frame at the front, but we believe the architects here felt that having a clear view of the railway and the sidings opposite was more important than having that obstructed by not just the levers, but the block shelf and any instruments on it.
Tantalisingly, the team will even be able to reuse original signals on original posts, which have been abandoned for decades.
As this was a transitional building, a lot of the original work was electric. Although colour lights are modern, there's been a lot of history over colour lights. They were first introduced, I believe, in the 30s, and certainly what you'll find on the network today in new installations is very different from what we're putting in. We have searchlight signals installed, which we'll be reinstalling in the original housings, and a Hotchley Hill will actually be installing them in the original signal head on the original post. So that is really authentic.
And so, in the depths of winter, the work to reopen Hotchley Hill continues. Once a blueprint for the future, now a curio from the past.
Personally, it has that real importance as something new. It's a real challenge, and it's also really exciting to make that physical difference on something that's part of a bigger project.